a minute, according to my phone.
Yep.
I figured I'd just go. I'd like to call the Linn-Mar School Board meeting to order, 5:00 p.m. in the boardroom of the Learning Resource Center. Could you please determine a quorum?
Buckles. Here. Eisenberg.
Here.
Lawson.
Here.
Maury.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
Walt. And Weaver.
Here.
Quorum is present at 5:00.
Okay, first I need a motion to adopt the
I
agenda.
move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Clark, Carrie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passed. Next we have audience communications. JT, I understand that you have a few to read to us.
Yeah, there are a few tonight.
Okay.
7, I believe. The first comes from John Kruger, and it reads, "Hello board, just a quick plug that I'll be eager to hear some data-based logic on keeping the children in hybrid, especially the elementaries. Going hybrid seems to admit that school transmission is an issue, preventing full in-person from taking place. As this is very disruptive to my kindergarten student, I'd like to know if we're going hybrid for some data-backed reason, or if we're just being cautious. As a parent, I'd like to see my child full-time in person." Secondly, from Heather Rutan, it reads, Thank you all for taking the time to read my concerns. First off, I want to state my name is Heather Rutan, and I am a mother to 3 girls who currently are in attendance at Linn-Mar. My main question is why haven't our kids returned to in-person learning? We are of 5% of the schools in the state of Iowa that are doing school virtually. Other schools have made it work. Why can't Linn-Mar seem to make it work? It's becoming a burden for many families, including ours. The numbers are low and our kids are regressing. My kids hate sitting in front of a computer. They want to be with their friends, and we want them to get the quality education Linn-Mar is known for. The hybrid option is almost worse for education purposes because of the inconsistent learning and expectations. When will we start putting the kids first? If parents have an option to go all virtual, why don't I have an option to send my kids in person full time? The risks outweigh the benefits, but yet you seem to make decisions that are not in the best interest of my family and a lot of other families and children. Full-time in-person learning is what the kids need. Why does the school board feel they don't? Sincerely, Heather Rutan. Next, from Dan and Stephanie Dre, says, Dear Superintendent Biscard and Linn-Mar School Board, hello, we are parents of 2 current high school students at Linn-Mar, and our thoughts and opinions only apply to the high school setting. We felt compelled to contact you before your next school board meeting on Monday, December 14th, as we know you will be preparing a plan for our school district students and staff following winter break. We would like to express our thanks and appreciation for all the work you have done and difficult decisions that you have made on behalf of the entire school district. Our professional opinion as 2 healthcare workers has guided all of our decisions since the beginning of the COVID pandemic. We feel that the current hybrid model at the high school has been executed successfully to this point. The mask mandate and social distancing requirements are key to this model being successful. We also feel due to the total enrollment at the high school, it will not be possible to safely return to full in-person learning after winter break. We are hopeful the hybrid model will continue to be an option for the district at the high school level until the impact of the COVID vaccine is more widespread. We appreciate your time and are thankful that you take parental opinions and concerns seriously. Please reach out to us with any questions or clarifications. Sincerely, Dan and Stephanie Dre. Next comes from Nicole R. It reads, Dear Linn-Mar Board, I am speaking as a concerned parent of a 10-year-old 5th grader. I need you to know the heartbreak I felt when his piano teacher called me one night after his lesson to tell me about his comment. She was very concerned about him not being himself lately, and his final comment of, I'd rather kill myself than deal with this online school anymore. A 10-year-old should not be having these thoughts, period. A 10-year-old should not be depressed, period. A 10-year-old needs socialization. Going to school 2 to 3 days per week is not enough. This merely isolates him from his actual friends who go on the other days. I strongly urge you to reconsider this learning structure. The governor announced last week that children need to be in school. The virus is not being transmitted from child to child. Not only is this affecting their educational learning and national scores, but also their mental health. It's time we start taking a child's mental health into consideration and the long-term effects this will have on them. All these changes are very stressful on them. Please reopen full-time and keep the options of online and hybrid for those families who want to choose it. This year has been more than tough enough in addition to being a vulnerable time for our preteens. Let's try to get some normalcy back for them by opening the schools back up full-time after the holiday break. Thanks for considering. The next communication comes from Matt and Kelsey Lee Slay. It reads, Dear Linn-Mar School Board, as parents of 3 children who attend Linn-Mar schools, a 5th and 3rd grader as well as a preschooler, we are writing to you to please do the right thing and open Linn-Mar schools for 100% in-person learning. Parents who choose online learning had a chance to do so. We'd certainly appreciate a choice for our children to attend 100% in person. We both work in the office for an essential business. While we know some families in the district relied on nannies to survive virtual learning and hybrid with college students that are back on break, while others made a mini school at their homes with several friends and neighbors, not all families in our district are in a position to hire a nanny. We know we aren't the only family in the district that actually go into work every day. On the very first day of virtual school, our son's computer didn't even work, among other technology issues. We'd like to do a quick shout out to Miss Laura Robertson, who has worked miracles the past several weeks. She showed up on our doorstep with our son's materials after the pickup of supplies didn't go smoothly. She dealt with technology issue after technology issue with not only her own setup, but many children in her class. She is so appreciated, but even more so this past month. Today was the first day back to in-person learning for our children. You could have sworn it was the first day of school with the excitement on their faces, even with 50-pound bags of books, computers, and snow gear. Please open the school so our children's mental health can improve and they continue to smile about going to school 100% in person every day. Quality in-person education is essential to the future of our children, families, and Linn-Mar community. Matt and Kelsey. The next communication is from Jessica Seam. It reads, Dear board members, I am a parent of a kindergarten student and a 5th grade student. I strongly encourage you to send children back full-time after break. Children are getting 0 learning on the off days. It is causing stress and no routine for children. It is causing stress and job concerns for many families. I happen to be a teacher as well, and each day my own children are not in school, I have to teach from home or take a day off, putting my own classroom of students in distress. Parents are having to involve more people and often high-risk family members to watch their children on off days. Kids need to be in school. Numbers are down. There is absolutely no reason for this anymore. The cases in school were minimal. Please do the right thing and send children back to school full-time where they should be. Thank you, Jessica. And lastly, from Alan Rutan. It says 2 topics. 1, COVID and full-time in-person learning. We have established at this point that children-to-children contact is not an issue. Children are not getting sick. Children are not dying. Children are not becoming ill from COVID. Adults are giving other adults coronavirus. That is the issue we have in our community. There is no reason our children can't be in school full-time. Other districts have figured it out. Other districts have figured out ways to make this option work. I do not understand why Linn-Mar School has not figured out how to accomplish this. It's absurd we are still dealing with online schooling and having an adequate education for our children. Number 2, bus service to Oak Savannah Court. I'd like to remind you that my children still do not have a bus to our neighborhood. There is not a public sidewalk connecting my neighborhood to any other public sidewalk in the district. My children are expected to walk in the streets, risking injury due to the selfish decision by the board. It would matter if it was your child. Alan Rutan. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, JT. We'll move on to our instructional reports, and before the high school, Shannon will give some information.
Yeah, first of all, this message is for our audience that's watching on YouTube today. Just a heads up that we have had some technology issues from our internet provider late this afternoon, so we don't anticipate there being any troubles. We think we have those things rectified, but just in case the internet does go down tonight or YouTube does not work for you tonight, we do have 2 backup plans in mind. First of all, this session will be recorded, and if the internet is not able to keep it up live, we will have that stay recorded for you and available as soon as possible. And then our second contingency plan is We do have hotspots here in the building that we hope can handle the YouTube broadcast as well if the internet does go down. So we'll hopefully between those two options, you'll be able to stay connected to our board meeting tonight. But I wanted to be upfront about that ahead of time in case there were any surprises or more problems. So, and then the last piece that I will just do to kick off our high school portion, we have Dr. Gustafson here tonight with the high school administration team. As he prepares to present tonight, this is kind of the first of several conversations we're going to have about the future of Linn-Mar High School and upcoming board meetings. We have time set aside in the next couple of board meetings as well in January, where we'll get into some facility conversations and other need areas. But we thought we would start tonight with a focus on where the high school has been and where they are at and where they are looking to go academically, with some different structures and different ideas as well, because that should drive our decisions on facilities and long-term planning. So with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Gustafson and his team.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for letting us, sorry about that. Thank you for letting us have this opportunity to facilitate a discussion with you. Our team is here tonight. Mark Hutchison, Director of High School Teaching and Learning, Joe Niedert, Kim Belt, Steve Goodall, Associate Principals, Abby Parker is here, who's a Dean of Students with us as well. And so what Steve and Abby are handing you is just a reference of some of the questions that we're going to be looking at tonight as we go through this. I'm going to go through quite a few slides quickly at the beginning, so if you have clarifying questions, please ask them. But if you wanted to just write down the question, and then what I don't want to do is present, and then all of a sudden we have like 2 seconds or 3 seconds for discussion for you guys. So our whole point is to try and, what Shannon really asked us to do was set it up so that a discussion on academic programming and what it would look like in the year 2030, or could look like in the year 2030, can take place after that. And so that's what our goal here is. So again, thank you for the opportunity to do this. And like I said, I'm going to present just a little bit and then open it up to discussion, and we will be here to talk. These guys know that they can just interject whenever they want to. If I forget something or delete a detail or a question is asked that they're better suited to answer, they'll just jump right in and do that. So one other thing I'll say, we're not really going to focus on specifics. We're not going to say, hey, in 2030 it's going to look like this, this, and this. What we're going to talk about is how we've come about to be the way that we are and what things that we see that are going to be taking place over the next decade, which will essentially form whatever decisions are made to say this is what Linn-Mar is going to look like in the year 2030 or up to the year 2030. So again, I'm going to start with 1996 to 2010 and 2010. There's a couple of reasons for this. I'm not going to go through every piece on here, by the way, so if you have questions on some of them, please don't hesitate to ask. But there's 3 reasons for why 1996 is chosen rather than saying 2000, 2010. I will say we did an exercise similar to this in 2010 where we looked ahead to 2020. I don't think we did it here at the board. I just don't remember coming to the board and talking about it, but I know we did it with Dirk and Katie at the time, and we also gave it to our high school staff. So this is an exercise that we've done before in that regard 10 years ago. But when you look at 1996, there's really 3 things that were happening. And in no particular order, our enrollment was getting ready to start to go, to grow immensely, and you could see it at that time. The Breaking Ranks document, it wasn't called Breaking Ranks 1 when it came out, but it eventually became Breaking Ranks 1, was out in 1996, which really talked about comprehensive high school reform, and gave different recommendations that a high school could follow so that it could restructure itself to better meet the needs of students in the 21st century. And so the other piece that was pretty important with this was that Jerry Van Dyke was hired as principal, and Jerry really focused on not just breaking ranks. It was something that took a lot of the movements that were happening at the time. but I give Jerry a lot of credit for putting things into place which were based off of research, based off of the things that people would say is best practice, and that's really what we formulated on. So when we talk about Linn-Mar in 2030, when we looked at Linn-Mar at 2010, or when we looked at Linn-Mar at 2020, it wasn't just, hey, what do we think, what do we think? It really was trying to use as much research as we could and looking at current trends to say this is what's going to happen, this is what we need to be ready for, and how are we going to try to get there. And so two things I'll point out on this one in particular, and you can see where the enrollments were growing. We grew about 500 students from 98 to 2010. But the modified block schedule, which started in 1999, and then the 4333, which we started and implemented in 2000. The modified block schedule, in breaking ranks, they had a lot of different recommendations. One of them was that no teacher should be teaching at the high school level more than 90 students. And so, and they also talked about how depth was very important as opposed to breadth. And so at that time, a lot of schools were moving into block schedules. The reason that Linn-Mar went to a modified block schedule, many of you may know this piece, but with math, foreign language, there was some real questions about what the research was saying as to whether or not it was of a benefit for students or not at the time. And so math, foreign language, and music was pushing to be able to meet every single day for an entire year. So that's where we came up with the modified block piece. Before that, our teachers were teaching 6 out of 7 periods. So the number of students that math and foreign language had at the time really didn't change because they were still teaching 6 periods. And when we got into the 8-period modified block schedule, they were still teaching 6 out of 8 at the time. And then 4333, which was known as essential learnings within breaking ranks, but the idea of essential learnings for maximizing those in English, science, math, and social studies. And so before this became something that all schools in the state did, we moved to it in 2000. And the reason I bring those two things up is because if you look at our scores of how students did or their performance on, whether it be on ITEDs at the time or ACT, after about 5 years of being into this, it's pretty significant what happened with the scores. Now, can you say, well, it's because of the modified block or because of 4333? I don't know if you could say either one of those in particular, but obviously if a kid's taking more math, they're going to be able to do better on a math test. And the one thing that the block schedule did was it allowed students to take more classes. And I'll show you what the effect of that will be here in a little bit when it comes to credits. So those two things happened during this time period. And again, it was structured. It wasn't just, hey, let's just do this because it sounds cool. There was actually some structure to it. So then we look at 2010 to 2020. And Breaking Ranks 2 came out in 2004, which added to Breaking Ranks. It focused more on collaboration, the PLC piece, personalization of education for all students, and then made some other recommendations in curriculum instruction and assessment. There was about 31 recommendations total within that. It was also the time period when the Iowa Core was something that was initiated, the Common Core as well, which led to standards and the movement towards standards, which all started about that time period. And so our association with Marzano at the high school started about 2010 when we made contact with them. They came and began working with our staff in 2011. And the focus really was on instructional decision making and moving towards how we could assess better. But also the standards piece, the scales that were created, the common formative summative assessment processes, all of those things, the origin started there. You can also see where the PLC piece really for the high school originated in 2013, but probably didn't kick in until about 2016 at a higher level. The one thing I want to point out on this, everything seems to take about a decade from once we really are looking at something and saying this is an area we need to move to. It really takes about a decade before we get there. You could look at our standards piece. We're still a year away from full implementation of it, although we have a lot of teachers that are moving into it much faster at this time. but things take time. And so even though these initiatives may have been put into place a number of years ago, it's just, what's the goal here? What are we after? And how do we stay the course with it? I think that really impacts what we're doing. The Every Student Succeeds Act has come into play now, which replaced No Child Left Behind, which all stems back to the Elementary and Secondary Education Acts from the 1960s as they get reauthorized. You can see the different renovation pieces that are in there. The one I'll mention here, the major renovation in 2016, individualized learning spaces was something we had a discussion about during that whole process. And we needed to build commons areas so that kids could do those types of things within that area. At the time, I'm guessing that you heard it because we were hearing it, why are we building two $35 million doorways? That type of discussion. And so, we were building commons areas, but as we'll continue to discuss here and get to the end, there's some things that were being put into place because that's what students were going to be needing to do in the future. The first year, did people use the common spaces exactly as we had them planned? I'm not going to sit here and say that they did, but more and more you can start to see how they're being used now, hopefully to the point where people are saying, I wish we had a few more spaces in some of those instances. The technology upgrade was a huge piece as well. The fact that we were able to go to one-to-one last year, had we not been able to do that, not knowing a pandemic would happen, I mean, I can't imagine where we would be at right now if that didn't take place. So the other thing that we use at the high school right now is the High Reliability Schools piece from Marzano. And the biggest thing about that is it's a structural piece. It helps us look at what's going on. It provides leading and lagging indicators so that we can continually watch and make changes as they need to be made based off of what those indicators are saying. And the whole point is to try and make sure that your school is a high reliability school for all students within the building. And so I think, as we keep moving on, the big point is we keep moving toward all students must succeed. And the measurements of all students and how schools are looked at is changing in that method. During this time period, most schools were not measured on growth of students individually. It was done on, wow, 90% of your kids are doing at this level, or 85% of your kids are doing at this level, and that's how schools were measured. Really, the focus has now moved, I think, more towards how do we show that these students are doing really well with all of their students. So that's a brief look back. I'll try and go through these really quickly. So what stayed the same in the 24 years? Well, we use a department structure. That has not changed. Some of the names have changed to the departments. We've had a couple come and go. I put the class size down there, and I didn't put it because I wanted you to see, ooh, wow, we keep going up in class size. I actually look at that number and say, even though our growth has done this, our class size number has not really changed. Not a lot at all. So department structures stayed the same. Credits. Credits are what we use to show progress towards graduation. You come to school, what's the end point? The end point is that you graduate. Well, how do you graduate? You accumulate credits, you meet this certain number, and then you are done. In 1999, our credits were 195. When we went to block schedule, kids are now able to take more credits. With the 4333 included in there, now kids not only can take more classes, but they're required to take more classes in certain ways. So we went up 55 credits in the year 2000. It might have been 2001 or 2. We grandfathered that up. So I think maybe it was 2002 that was the first class to have 250 required credits. But we are there now, and we've stayed there at that number. So the credits are there. They've stayed the same. The state of Iowa does base a lot of what we do on the Carnegie units and what's required. Breaking Ranks will talk about how we need to get away from the Carnegie unit system, but we have not broke free of that, at least in my mind, in many of the things that we do at the high school level. And the college and university admissions requirements, even though they are based, they'll talk about the holistic model and different things like that. there still is a lot of credit requirements for things that take place within the college university and even within the post-secondary emphasis that kids get into. So what's that going to look like in 2030? We'll talk about that here in a minute, but credits have been something that's continued to stay with us. Grades. We still have grades. Credits show the progress that we're making. Grades determine the level of progress that we're making. We used to be an A, B, C, D, F school. We moved to a 13-point scale in 1999. We still have a 13-point scale. Instead of being based on percentage of points, we're moving to a standard proficiency scale based on a conversion. So these things are still in place. And do we see some tweaks happening, things like that? Sure, maybe, but I'm not sure that we could say grades aren't going to be here in the next decade. I will say 10 years ago, people were still saying, well, someday grades are going to be gone. But when it comes to many of the things that we do, we're still asked for grades all the time. Transcripts. So we have grades, we have credits, and the transcript is our record of that to show student progress. I don't see that this is going to necessarily change, but we'll talk about this here in a minute. But transcripts have been with us. They were here in 1996. They're still with us today, and they're still quite important for what we do. And you can just see the types of courses that we have that are up there as well. And then kind of a late one that I put on here is academic terms. You have quarters, you have semesters, you have year-long. There's usually a start point, there's usually an end point. Do we see this changing? I think this is one that we'll argue may change a little bit, and part of that will be because of the way things are moving. I'm not sure that you could still put this on and still have it. But it seems that, academic terms are something that could continue to allow flexibility for students. There's some political things with this, though, that make it a little more unique as well. And you're all very well aware of that, even though it says dates are set by the state. The one date that they set is your start date. Cannot be at a certain point or be before a certain point. Would those things ever be challenged and changed because it may only take some kids 4 weeks to finish a course as opposed to 9 weeks or 18 weeks or whatever it may be. So we'll talk about that here just a little bit as we move on. Okay, so these things have stayed the same, at least in our minds. Department structure, it's there. It organizes the instructional planning. You've got credits, which measure academic progress. The grades determine the level of learning. You have transcripts, which are used to chart the academic progress and level of learning. You have terms, and the question is which one of these are going to remain. I think with current infrastructure of different things that are out there, I'm not sure that we could sit here and say, departments aren't going to be around or grades aren't going to be around in 2030. Maybe they'll be gone, but I think it seems likely that we're going to maintain those structures within our academic program. And so as a result of that, what's going to happen? Again, what guidance is out there? Breaking ranks 1 and 2 are still around. You have the Common Core, you have ESSA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act. You have special education regulations. You have talented and gifted. You have ELL. All those requirements are there. We utilize high reliability schools by choice, and that's being done as a district now as well. But again, the major academic focus areas that are going to impact the structure for the next decade really seems to be, at least in academic programming, the expected learning growth of all students. And so how does that affect what your structure is? And so, if we keep in mind we're going to have these structures, it seems that any structure that we have, we need to be flexible, we need to provide options, and we need to provide choice to meet the expectations for all students to show learning growth. And so our thinking is that by 2030, the focus on structure, emphasizing flexibility, options, and choice makes a lot of sense. In other words, we could say we're just going to continue with the way things were in 2010 or the way things are in 2020. What we're saying is things are going to need to be even more flexible more option-oriented and more choice option-oriented in 2030. So how does that look in a high school? And so our starting point would be choice of instruction, the format of a required class. So what might this look like? And I chose American government, that's what I used to teach. And if you were to have a choice which said you can have you can take American government either as a traditional based, as a blended course, as an online course, or a project-based course, which one would work better for you? I know as a student myself, I could probably look at 4 of those options for American government, and that would be suitable for me. If I was, for Jeff, looking at science or math, I don't know that I should go beyond traditional. That's what I needed in order to do well or succeed in those courses. I still believe that for myself and my own learning. But which option would work best for you? All the priority standards, and this is where the standards piece gives you flexibility. If you have specific standards, if you have, I'll just throw out a number, 12 priority standards that have to be met or achieved, you know, if you have to achieve mastery, competency, whatever you want to call it, proficiency for that before you can be done with the course, no matter which way you would choose an offering, you would have to meet all of those standards in that offering, whichever way it is done. And I will mention down here too, we'll show that visually, each of the elements of traditional, blended, online, and project-based really blend together. They don't stand alone in a class. So, what's a traditional based format? It's in class, it's a set schedule with a set time each day, and it has the length of a term. A blended based format, it's in class and out of class. You know, some days again are in class, some are out of class. It's a term length. Online digital based, there's a lot of ways you can do this one. You could have it where it's simply a term length taught by a teacher. The student is just online, much like we were the past 2 weeks at the high school. And the student is simply engaging with the teacher, teacher's engaging with the student in the class online at the same time. Or you could do it more independently with an independent time frame. All the goals are there, the teacher oversees the class, the teacher guides the class, but the student starts it at a specific time or whenever they want to, and they end it whenever they're done. And so you could do anything you want to with some of these, and online digital gives you a little more of a choice or an option. I will say that in the state of Iowa right now, you're not allowed to do everything that you want to do in these formats, but maybe that will change as we move into the next decade. And then the project-based format, where the priority standards are achieved through more hands-on means. But again, the bottom piece is the same priority standards must be met for the same course, no matter what the choice or the format is. Now, originally, when we were thinking of this, is that each one of these would just kind of be a standalone. You'd have your traditional, you'd have your blended, you'd have online project-based, and you would choose which one you would have. At the very bottom, you can see in red, you gave the same summative assessment on each one of those at the end of a course. A student, no matter which way they took it, should be able to do that summative assessment at the same level, depending on which choice of format that they chose. So we thought of them in those terms at first, but I think we've changed our thinking to have it be more of this. In other words, if you take a traditionally based course, you're going to have some project-based lessons, you're going to have blended lessons, you're going to have online digital lessons. I mean, they can go either way. It's more intertwined, but it would be a primary thing of it's more primary traditionally based class, or it's primarily a project-based class, etc. And so the meat of the discussion, hopefully, is about this. You know, what would we start with? We would probably start with a small number of required classes and expand from there. But the implication pieces of what this would mean. Economy of scale is a big thing. If you want more options, more students, and more student requests create more options. You have them available. Fewer students and fewer option requests do not give you as much flexibility in creating options and choice for students and parents. pacing, the speed of completion. Again, if you're doing something like an online classroom, it may be more varied. It can be, certainly. And so that would be an implication, because now all of a sudden, instead of a 9-week term, you're talking about a variable term. A daily class schedule. We've learned this in the last 9 months. It has to be flexible. So, you know, and choice-oriented. You can't say, hey, we're just going to keep our same normal schedule and we're going to do all of these things with it. You have to be able to have it be flexible enough and be able to change enough so that you can do those things. And I will tell you, as we go through this process now, we continually look at the things that people seem to say, I really like this about this schedule now that we've changed it. We've changed our schedule 3 times in 9 months, and that's ridiculous for us to do that. And we've made some adjustments with it as well. But there are some things that people like about each schedule, and so how do you try and match and meet what people want for the flexibility and choice that different schedules offer? And then the last piece, then I put it in yellow, how do such offerings affect the setting? Well, if you have a traditional learning space, it's probably going to look more like what we would see as a classroom. An online, digital, independent, small group learning space is going to be more of a commons or a collaboration or a conference room type of a setting. That's where they're going to be doing those things. And if it's more project-based, then it's probably going to be more of a studio type of a place. You know, and even things that are beyond the school setting and more into the community. And we've seen that obviously with what we've been are using with project-based learning at this time. So I think the big piece, and I'll give Joel a lot of credit here because he's always making sure that we're keeping this in mind. But we need to make sure that all of these choices, whatever they might be, are not denied to any students based on non-school factors. That any student that wants to do project-based learning or online digital learning would have those types of options. So are we sitting here saying, and this is going to happen next year? No, we're not. We're not saying this is what this looks like exactly. We're not saying that either. But hopefully, this at least starts some discussion of what is Linn-Mar going to look like in 2030? I probably forgot a lot of things I was going to say, and I apologize for that. But I want to allow you the opportunity to discuss things with each other and with us as well. And I guess I did, just in case somebody said, well, can you give us a prompt? So I came up with a question, which would be, you know, if I were to ask you what you would say is the biggest takeaway from what we just discussed, or your biggest question that you may have moving forward toward 2013, what might you say that is? And thanks for letting us talk and share. So I guess I want to use the rest of the time for dialogue back and forth.
I was wondering if, are you thinking with, the goal is every class at the high school will be presented in more than one way? Or are you trying to get to the point where it's all 4 ways? Or you kind of reasonably looking at what makes sense for the class? I mean, there's different things.
Yeah, I think
Wondering.
For any required class, in other words, everybody has to pass this class, it would make sense that you have the most options for those.
Okay.
Because some kids are going to want to say, you know what, I want to take this class and I want to do it online, I want to do it during the summer. Or I want to do it at this time because I don't want to, I've got so much class space for traditional, and I want to take these classes during those times.
Okay.
You could do that. So, but if you had an elective class that was more geared towards juniors and seniors, or even freshmen and sophomores, you may limit the number of options that you would have for those at first, because that's where you get into the economy of scale. You just aren't going to be able to have, if 30 kids sign up for a class, to say, hey, guess what, we're going to be able to do this with in all these formats. It doesn't seem practical in that regard. But
One,
you
I
know.
think also you have to consider the teacher will know what they're more comfortable with too.
Well, and I think you would
That will
have,
help.
yeah, you would have different teachers,
Help with
obviously, that
delivery.
would probably be more geared towards, hey, this is my wheelhouse versus
Mhm.
this format.
Okay.
Is
Questions?
there a
comments?
possibility on the project-based and the online that you could finish early because they still have to complete everything and they have the standards, that there would possibly be enough classes offered that as soon as they're finished that they could start another one? I would say the online and the project-based would probably be the easiest if they wanted to, you know, as electives come around, that, and they finished, they could get into another class that they would like to take, where traditionally they may not have that opportunity, but with the online and project-based, they would have that opportunity.
I mean, it depends on how, it's always in how you set up the game. If you set it up so that students can, if they finish a class in October, they can start another class in October, you know, then they'd be able to do that. The question sometimes then gets into, well, we only have these teachers that are going to have to get through this group and then this group. So I get that those pieces are there, but the ideas of, hey, we have more options with when we start and stop certain classes are going to be
But
there.
it is a
With kids-
possibility. Yeah.
If you can find people to do that.
Well,
Others of you. Tim? do
I
you have
guess
something
for
to say?
me, the biggest takeaway, I know that's why we're talking about today, is, you know, thinking about the different options and what you said about what spaces we need, and as we, you know, you said, Shannon, we're going to be talking about that over the next several board meetings, and, you know, maybe we just don't, it kind of got me thinking, maybe we don't need a second high school, but right now, maybe we need to think about how we're going to offer these, and you know, whether it's maybe it's another building that's, like you said, a conference room and that type of thing that can house that. I did have a question on right now we do more project-based, I think, we do more project-based with Iowa Big, which is upperclassmen, but you're thinking eventually this would be a 9 through 12 options, I assume more
Some kids,
upperclassmen on certain things or not? Or what?
absolutely. Some kids are
Okay.
going to learn more in just more, I hate to overuse the term hands-on, but rather than sitting at a desk and trying to
Yeah.
absorb in that manner, they're going to be able to be more engaged when they're actively doing things. So I don't think you limit it by saying it has to be something that's just for upperclassmen or just for this. I think we have to be really careful with that, because we can think of students that are 9th and 10th grade students right now who are struggling, who may really need something like certain programs to be able to get them to feel like, oh yeah, this is okay, this makes sense to me now. This is more how I learn with it. I mean, I think that's what with Steve and Compass, you know, I think we've really started to see how we can work with students who the bigness of a high school or just the traditional environment is not necessarily for them, so the alternative piece works well. So I call it alternative, call it what you want. Yeah, I don't think we limit anybody from being able to take in a U.S. History 9 setting, if all 4 of those options are there. I think you could do something like that. Again, it comes down to teachers, it comes down to how it's set up, all of those things, but it's a possibility, absolutely.
To follow up on both of Tim's points there too, the next board meeting in January, the first one, I really want to spend more time on that project-based piece and kind of elaborate and define that a little better, because it's pretty, just a concept on the screen right now, but I think that'd be an important piece, and then availability with that, and then, like you said, that leads into the facility discussion right after that too, so, so stay tuned, those will be fun conversations for us to have as well.
Kara, did you have something? Okay.
I think that what I want to make sure that we do is wrapped around this is the support for the students in making the most effective choice. I think sometimes we get the feedback that that is something that they need more of now when there's less choice. And so my immediate concerns were, what if a kid thinks that this is going to work really well for them and it doesn't? And I know that that comes up before where students are participating in Iowa Big, and we had talked about this when we were discussing the online options. But like, I really want to make sure that the high school has the capacity to support the students in these decision makings and, you know, kind of moderating it, I guess, through the whole semester, ensuring success. Because you repeatedly talked about measuring success now, instead of it being 80% of the high school is doing X, Y, and Z, it's the growth of the individual students. But from a perspective of having enough counselors at the high school, like, I don't know that I feel like we would have the capacity to accomplish this
Well,
successfully.
I think one thing you could say, though, is especially with the required courses, is teachers would be able to say, here are students who have really succeeded in my class. They do these things. And if over time you would have somebody who would say, here's the students who really succeed in a project-based classroom setting like this, because we're talking about meeting the standard criteria for it. So, you know, at first, are we going to have all of that knowledge to say, hey, Barry, you're going to be really successful if you do this? I think the question that we would have is not just support in making the decision, but support during the decision. So if you have kids that take online, they're going to need support. So yes, you have spaces for them to work independently. You may have conference areas for them to work, but you're going to have availability of teachers to still work with them in settings when they're having lots of questions. And I would say in any of these formats, you would want to do that. So not only the question prior to, but I think the supports during the term and what's available to them. When pie in the sky, if you have a place that's open from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. where they can drop in and they can have somebody that's there to support them or a place to work and do those type of things, you know, those are things that we would move toward. And as we do that, those individuals are going to say students who take a class online must have these type of skills, or they must develop these skills, or you must be aware that these are things that are going to play a role in whether they succeed or not. Obviously, the last term or so, we've gained some of those tools. But your point is well taken. How do you try and work with students in making the best choice? And I would say school
Like
counselor plays a
sussing
role
it
in
out
that,
of them,
but I would
right?
say teachers play a big role in that too. Much like they do now where they say, should you take English 1 or advanced English 1? You know, those, you're going to have teachers, you're going to have counselors that are all going to be talking about, here's the things you need to consider when you make that decision. So does it mean that we have to have, you know, more of this type of a counselor or more of teachers or anything like that? I think, you know, we're going to need some of those things, but I also think that we have some things in place that already help to do some of those things, but we're going to have to maximize them a lot more than we are. I'm not saying that we're there with it.
So I would say that would be concerning. Because right now, we're talking about like, just what we're doing now, right? Like, you've got guidance counselor meetings coming up in January, right? Like, where this different grade levels are meeting. So, you know, when we did the high school tour last year, we had talked about, Britt and I were having a conversation about what tracks kids need to be on at what time to meet their career goals. And we're talking about like freshmen that need to be engaged in these wait lists and programs. And so I think that's where, like, I'm kind of hitting a wall of making sure, and this is really just, we need to make sure we have the appropriate staff in place at the high school. Not that I'm against any changes, but if our students are already needing these additional sports for, you know, career tracks, and, you know, we talk so much more about, you know, career tracks and as an alternative to college, this is another decision for overwhelmed high school students to have to try to figure out what works best for them. And I just want to know and see that they are supported in these decisions at the high school. And then it's not just like, okay, like you gave me a list here of questions, right, that I'm meeting with you and kind of trying to push you through and get your schedule made and get you on to, like, it's not by anybody that's doing something intentionally wrong. I just think it's a capacity issue to be able to reach every student and not the loudest student.
No, I don't disagree with that, but the one thing I would say is if we only do traditional, I think we're doing disservice in that regard, even if we try to dabble in the other areas within a traditional setting, because I know that we have students right now that are going to struggle or are struggling in a traditional setting that may do well in those other settings.
So I
And
think
that's,
we totally should be flexible into moving towards this. I think that we need to focus on having the right staff in place at the high school.
Well, and it may need to happen, some of that discussion of what their learning style is in
Earlier.
7th, 8th grade. You know, present different ways within classes to see what they're successful or not successful with, to say, okay, learn from this. When you get into the high school, you're going to have these choices. You've learned this about yourself. You do not do well if you don't have some kind of everyday thing. Maybe you are a traditional person. You're definitely not an online, totally motivated by yourself person. I just think if those discussions can happen earlier, so part of what we do is when they get to this point and they're having to make these decisions, maybe it will be a little easier for the counselors and everyone else. I don't know. It's just,
I think it's been interesting as we've gone through the pandemic where we've had some folks, the feedback is, my student thrives in online or hybrid.
there's always those that
And then on
do.
the other side, we have parents that are saying, my student is really not doing well in this format. And I think, you know, those things are really telling that some kids thrive in certain environments and certain formats and other students don't. And I don't think it's just all over the place. I think it can even be by subject matter and just how they can learn that
That's
best.
true.
So
Kara, I think
kind
your
of
point's
has
really
a
well,
forced choice in some ways, I guess.
I think your point's really well taken too, as far as making sure we have the supports for the students and for the staff to be successful. The best example I would give right away, I think, is the blended learning example we've used the last several years. You know, traditional, that's been in place for a long time at every school, and we've started to use more of the blended format the last several years, and these guys and gals did a great job of really structuring how we support teachers to prepare to teach in that environment, and how you support students in that environment, and helping them make those choices too. But we did that very gradually and very intentionally. I think that would have to be the same here. What we're talking about in 2030 is potentially have all 4 of these systems really up and running in those next 10 years. It's going to have to be gradual, so it's not overwhelming, and make sure we don't get ahead of ourselves too much, and make sure the supports are there to be successful, skill-wise and staffing-wise. I just assumed Jeff put that plug into you to add staff, because he's always asking for more staff. I thought, if you go around the back door here and go to you to talk about that today.
It's all good.
We'll talk about that tomorrow, Jeff.
Yeah, yeah. Rick, did you have something you'd like to
Oh, yeah.
comment about?
Yeah, I've been taking some notes, and first, I think this is fantastic, because one of the constant themes in education research right now is that we are still using the archaic model and it doesn't reflect after graduation what students are able to do in the workforce or in an apprenticeship or on college campuses, whether it's hands-on learning or, you know, traditional classroom. People more and more are saying there's a disconnect, and I think that acknowledging and embracing that people learn in different ways and offering those different learning styles is a really good step forward. I'm not as cautious as Shannon. I'm more of a let's jump in and get it figured out quicker, but I'm alone in that a lot of the time, so I get that. But what I think it points out, and is the positive that I'm taking away, is, you know, we all work and live differently once we're out of high school. So enabling students to figure that out sooner, helping them learn who they are sooner. I mean, this all plays into the career planning conversation. And I guess as we continue these conversations, I would love to learn more about where that fits into this development, because as Kara was saying, you know, where the career and college planning comes in, and you take those assessments in 8th grade, and a lot of kids, they're, oh yeah, I remember taking that, we didn't do anything with it. And I know you guys do a lot with it, but that conversation piece and having someone there that can work with the kids and help them understand, well, your assessment says your personality gears you towards this, and now we'll have learning styles that actually can apply. Well, yes, you're geared towards hands-on learning, but up until this point, the options for that have been limited. This would open up doors to actually help them apply those early assessments in 8th and 9th grade to actually impact their 4-year plan, which excites me. So I would second the comment about counselors. Teachers can do a lot and they can recommend a lot, but having that mentor, that counselor who is trained in career and college and who can sit down with a student after their assessment and say, these are the options that we have at the high school, and I think this would be good for you, and what do you think? And that's a more complicated conversation than the ICAP checklist that the state wants you to do. So this whole thing really excites me. I can't wait to hear more as you flesh out these plans. I would like to know, when you're talking about, and I know you don't have it all figured out, but when you're talking about like variable term lengths or summer classes, how does that impact staff? I mean, do we have teachers who are raring to teach online classes over the summer, or hanging out at the high school till 9 o'clock because that's when a student can come in and ask questions? Is that?
Don't know yet?
Absolutely. I mean, you could have a teacher that comes in at noon and works until 8 o'clock because that's their schedule. You could do different things. Some of them obviously take money because if you're going to have teachers that are going to be working during the summer, you're going to have to pay them in that regard. But the possibility is what we're looking at right now. If you had such a system, you could have some kids that are going to finish potentially with high school a lot earlier and maybe even say, you know what, I'm not going to finish high school per se, but I am going to start my college pieces, and the relationships with the high school and the college could continue to develop in that regard, which I think is something that's probably going to continue to happen. That's a Jeffism, but it's there. Those are things that we're continually expanding and working toward doing. So what will that look like in 10 years, and how will that change, and how will the laws and how will those types of things change to allow for certain adaptations that we can't necessarily do right now?
What part of this does the state absolutely not allow at the moment?
Well,
I know 100% virtual is only approved in certain schools, but is there anything that you've talked about that beyond that?
If you talked about start and end times, you might have to, I mean, there's waivers for everything, but they've been less inclined to give a waiver for when you would start a year or things like that. So, you know,
Okay.
do you delineate the start of a school year differently in 2030 than you do now in 2020? And I think that's a discussion that goes beyond what, you know, we could say, hey, this is what we like, but I think other factors are going to play a role in determining whether that's even allowed or possible.
My last comment, and then I'll let whoever's next go. I liked the idea, Sandra said, you know, trying things on in middle school. I remember looking at your dates made me feel a little old, which I know some people are going to roll their eyes at me right now, but that's okay. But I do remember in middle school, in 7th grade, we had to take industrial tech, home ec, and art, but then we picked 2 to focus on in 8th grade, and it geared us up for what we could do. I would love to have that conversation between you and, you know, the middle schools about what can they try on in middle school to help them learn that learning style before they pick their whole 4-year plan in high school. So could we dabble, like they try one project-based and it's like short, you know, maybe like a J-turn kind of thing, or I don't know. I think that would be interesting as well.
Yeah, we've had some kind of initial conversations in middle school before this as far as, you know, blended learning, what does that look like at a middle school level, some other project-based things too, there, just to start to explore a little bit there, which would fit vertically with this conversation too.
I think it's great. I like where you're going, so.
I love the flexibility of this and the change and the open to lots of different ways for everyone. It makes so much sense. Barry, is there anything you'd like to add?
Just real quick, Jeff, I really appreciate you and your team bringing this together, because probably 10 or 12 or how many years ago, we were having discussions about what the next high school was going to look like. I remember at that time, we said, but we don't know where the first high school is going to look. So all of this has been a dream. It's been kind of fuzzy. You guys have done a tremendous job for me. I know we have a long ways to go yet, but I think this is huge.
It is huge.
It also adds to finally getting the answer on why we were going to high school. So I appreciate your comment on that too, because that was kind of tough for me for a few years. Folks didn't understand why we were spending all that money just to make a nice building run nicer. So appreciate you all, and I'm looking forward to more discussion.
Jeff, I like the fact that we're opening up opportunities for different types of learners, but if to piggyback on Kara and Britt, obviously I'm a big supporter of I'm loud enough, you guys know me well enough to know that. Big supporter of more counselors, because if we're trying to articulate what goes on in the middle school, to say, okay, now you've got this huge jump into high school and you have all these other selections. I think if we have more counselors to bridge the gap and let those middle school teachers communicate, because we have the different forms of media that we could do that, to the high school counselors and the teachers, I think it's a win-win situation. I realize that that's more staff, but if we're looking at what's best for our students. As JT read some of the letters there, I think that's an indicator that not everybody is going to learn the same way. But with your proposal here, I think it allows for more successful learning by a variety of students. And if they can get that guidance early to figure out what is their best learning style, not only is it only going to help them through graduation of high school, I think it opens up even a learning style that they can carry on at the collegiate level too. And I think that's a win-win situation, because you're talking high school, college, career, and I want to have a career, and if I know those things in advance and can work on those things, I think, and you look at post-graduation numbers and how successful they are, I think it just adds a great opportunity for the Linn-Mar School District to work on that. And I know we're not going to do anything just start all over, but traditionally we've always been a little bit at a time. And as Shannon said, if you look at the blended learning, we had very few classes, and seeing how successful it was, and we've kept building opportunities, and we have increased. And I think if we start off with something like this and have that counseling mode, I think this could really be absolutely fantastic.
Any other? We want to thank you. It's awesome. We're excited. I can tell you guys are too. Please, let us know anything we can do to help. Anything else?
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Appreciate the
you
high
so
school
much,
team
everyone.
presenting,
Thanks for
and
all coming.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to continuing this conversation next month.
Absolutely. Okay, next we have the Marion City Council's report from the December 3rd meeting.
I reviewed the agenda,
There really wasn't anything pertinent. Okay, we'll move on to our Shannon cabinet update, review of the return to learn plan.
Yeah, a couple of updates for you right away. First of all, it's just really good to get kids back in school today. It felt right. Schools were empty the last 2 weeks. Just the energy back in the buildings today was fantastic to see. So really glad to have that happen again. The update for the last 2 weeks, virtual learning has its challenges, but I do believe learning continued. I really feel confident that happened as much as possible. I think our teachers did a wonderful job of adapting and changing, and sitting in on a first grade virtual classroom is a pretty unique experience to get to do, and to watch teachers pull that off, and the excitement of the kids doing that was pretty special. So I'm really pleased with how that went overall. Obviously, that is not our preferred option, but to know we can do that and did do that successfully this time was encouraging and kind of fun to see as well. So I mentioned to you in your Friday memo, legislative forum with Grantwood AA, but I do want to touch base on that real briefly with you too, because the legislative session's quickly approaching, opens on January 11th. There's still a lot of unknowns what this session will look like, from logistically, and will the Capitol be open? Will they have an opportunity for people to connect with them in person? Will it be virtual? They have not determined really many of those questions yet, so that's something we'll have to keep an eye on and see. I was really pleased to have so many legislators join us in our conversation on Friday. I wasn't sure if that's because they could hide via Zoom easier, or if it was just more convenient for them too, but either way, it was really nice to have. I think we had 15, 16, 17 of them from the area joining in with the Grantwood Soups. So really good discussion. Several themes that I think is just important to get on our radar now before we begin the advocacy season this year. Access is a big one, whether that is internet access for students, for staff, for schools. That's one that I heard legislators on both sides of the aisle really emphasize. That's something they want to try to address this year, so that's something I think we could continue to advocate for as well. Budget was by far, in a way, the biggest challenge, and both sides of the aisle, again, recognize there are some things there they want to look at as well. They did say on a positive side, both sides felt comfortable that we would know what our SSA is within the legal time period for that. Didn't get a real good idea if it would be a significant amount or not, but they were confident they could come to agreement on something relatively quickly, which is always helpful in our planning. As far as The other piece of the budget aspect this year that's different this year compared to most years with SSA is, many of you have seen the news lately, it matches what we've seen as well, the decline in enrollment that a lot of schools saw this year because of the derecho, because of COVID, but then also the increased costs that go with it this year. It's not like you have less students this year, so you have less expenses to go with it. You have exactly the worst case scenario where you have less students, less funding to then support with more expenses. So that was a big topic of conversation. Really comes down to about 3 different ways to try to approach that, and that's something we'll need to talk about as a board and try to be consistent with the groups out there as well, because if we can give a similar message and a similar consistent request, I think we'll have a better chance of being heard. Is that just an increase in SSA that's significant this year? Is that allocation of one-time money to help bridge the gap from decreased enrollment for schools? Or is that the opportunity to either pick this year's enrollment numbers or last year's enrollment numbers for next year's funding as well? Those are the kind of the 3 things that legislators said they've been hearing, and we're curious what districts' priorities or preferences would be. So JT and I talked about that a little bit this morning too, that we're going to kind of run the numbers, see what we think would be best for us, and then we'll get some clarity to you on that topic as well. But that was definitely a topic that I was actually surprised to hear when legislators were open to that conversation then too. And then the last 2 things, I guess, that came up, a little more academic focused, were really around the concern for vouchers. They think vouchers will surface again this year. And they think it could surface pretty strong in one format or the other, so we'll have to be tuned into that conversation as well to make sure public dollars are going to public schools where it should be going. So that'll be an interesting conversation. But then the other piece was really focused on how do we help students catch up, for the lack of a better term, recovery services, additional supports, whether that's extended school year, different resources available, funds for schools to help really close that academic gap that's been forming since the derecho, since COVID started as well. So those are kind of the big themes that they see being on their dockets for this year, and obviously we would probably agree with most of those as well that are priority areas in addition to several other things. So, so we'll definitely be a topic for us in January to talk about as well, and how we want to approach legislators based on what format they'll be operating under as well. So before I go on, any questions or thoughts you have on the legislative or the advocacy piece?
How strong was the vouchers a year ago? Was that coming out of, was that mainly federal, or was that on the state level?
Did you say a year ago, did you say?
Yeah,
Larry?
yeah.
It wasn't as strong as a year ago as it probably was 2 years ago.
Okay.
2 years ago was a stronger push for that, and then it got, for the most part, stopped at that point. I would say the Senate and House leadership last year wasn't as receptive to taking the hard look at vouchers. There's been some changes in some of the leadership groups this year, so the assumption is that may be more of an open topic again this year as well. So, but that was more of a state topic for us, partly because of the federal pressure to look at some things differently too. So,
Right. Okay.
yep. Other thoughts or questions on that one?
When you're ready for us to do something, let us know.
Yeah,
Yep.
and any guidelines you can give us would be appreciated.
Yeah, we have a UEN meeting on Friday, so I'm anxious to put together some consistent messaging across the board there as well.
That'd be great.
And then we can all be talking the same language. I think would be important to do. So, quick update on Linn County Public Health and the hospitals. They have been extremely good partners for us throughout this entire process. Our weekly meetings are very valuable, even though we don't have a hospital connection necessarily like they do. It's just good to hear firsthand where things are at. I think both Linn County Public Health and both hospitals feel like they're in a better spot now than they were 3-4 weeks ago. There's a little bit of optimism in their voice compared to a couple weeks ago when they were very, very concerned. So they're appreciative of the community response and schools' response to help get them in a better location. There is some anxiousness on their part about potential impact of the upcoming holidays. Just a lot of unknowns on that piece as well. Something to continue to follow. But then the other piece that they updated this on was vaccinations, which honestly, just to have the point that we're actually talking about vaccinations now is wonderful. I know it's going to be a long journey, but at least we can see that starting to happen, which is great. So in essence right now, for school personnel for vaccinations, they have a tiered system put together. The first tier, 1A, is a lot of those emergency healthcare providers people in the senior centers as well that are really dealing with people who have COVID or at high risk, and our school nurses and health assistants are actually in that category. They were in touch with Lisa last week to get our numbers and confirm that, so we were pleased to hear that that's our initial staff in our health offices will be in that category too. And then 1B is the next category, and the way it's worded is school staff is included in that category. There's been a little misunderstanding of whether that means teachers and principals or all school staff or exactly what that looks like too, so there's still some clarity to get figured out there. But it's either way, it's good to see that our some of our staff are in those early rounds for vaccination opportunities too. So, and then we asked the question about, do they envision schools being locations for mass vaccinations or things like, I remember as a kid going through, they said they do not anticipate that happening. One, because of some contracts they have with some pharmacies and different things with state and federal agencies to provide that. But two, they also think the rollout of the vaccine will be staggered so much that those mass opportunities won't be there. So, but that was just kind of interesting as well. So, other than that, they've been really good partners, continue to be good communication with us as well. So,
Question about the vaccines. It just popped in my head. We don't have authority to say if you want to go back into school, you need to take the vaccine, or teach staff to take the vaccine, or anything like that?
no. As of now, no. There's people asking that exact question and getting some legal guidance on what authority we do or don't have on that, whether we can require it of employees or students as well. So, but as of now, no. Yep.
A vaccine question as well. So, there's been a lot of talk about, when you get the vaccine, there's a 24-hour, like you shouldn't plan on going to work kind of thing. So are we coming up with some sort of schedule for staff that are planning to get the vaccine so that we don't, like all of our staff get the vaccine and then we don't have staff for 2 days?
Everybody's out. So, yeah, we thought we'd make sure we got it on a Friday so they'd be safe for the weekend. And,
just ruin their
good to go
weekend.
for Monday. So, no,
Oh
we have not had that conversation yet. Something we need to talk about, and as we get more information about the timing, we'll need to.
I've just read about hospitals dividing their staff into 3 or 4 groups, and then, okay, this group, and then we anticipate you not being here for 2 days. I just want to make sure that we're prepared so that when our tier comes up and our staff have that option, that we're prepared to still have our buildings somewhat staffed while getting the vaccine.
Yep. Yeah, what this is really going to do is lead to a whole other round of new experiences for us, and that's one. But then also, something we'll have to talk about at a board and cabinet level in the near future is, what does that look like once somebody has been vaccinated? Do they still need to wear a mask? Do they still, just all those different pieces of the puzzle for us as a system to look at as well. How do we want to approach those things? So those are conversations we'll have to have in the near future as well. So good, like I said earlier, good opportunity to have those, excited to have those conversations, but that next phase will be just lead to more questions for us to try to figure out too.
No, it's great to actually be having a vaccination conversation. So,
Yes,
Good
it
point.
is.
Good point.
So, and then return to learn plans, as we have been going through kind of a transition phase for us lately. Really, as I look back to the start of our school year, we had been very consistent and steady up until Thanksgiving or early November, and then numbers started to climb and we had to make some adaptations. So those changes are hard for everybody. So I certainly recognize that's hard for staff, it's hard for families, hard for students, not our ideal situation. I think as we get through this holiday period, hopefully we can then start to provide more of a consistent location or a procedure for us to follow as well. But we still have some unknowns in the next couple of weeks that we need to be cognizant of and planful for, I think, too. In general, our numbers have improved, which is fantastic to see. The county numbers have gotten better very consistently the last several weeks. Our staffing numbers have gotten better, so we're really pleased about that too. We'll be curious to see now that we're no longer in virtual, will our staffing numbers and student COVID numbers go back up again, or will they stay where they're at? We'll find out as time goes on, I guess. So we'll have to monitor that pretty carefully too. But really, by going virtual, it did do what we needed it to do. It gave us a chance to get our staff back, to let the county numbers calm down, and get us back in a better spot. So even though it wasn't ideal, it did serve its purpose for us. With that said, I hope we don't have to do it again. Hopefully this will be the only time we have to go virtual, and if we have to again, we'll revisit it, but that's certainly not where we want to be. So our numbers-wise across the board, we're in a much, much better spot, so that's encouraging. The biggest challenge, I was trying to give you where we're at with everything, but also our biggest challenge looking forward. In my mind, our biggest challenge right now is predicting what COVID is going to look like over winter break, and then how do we plan accordingly as best we can for that. So in our current situation, I'll go through a couple options with you before I give you my recommendation. As we've talked, right now we are committed with our middle schools and high schools to be in a hybrid model through the second quarter, which is January 29th. So what I'm really talking about, these next few things are really our pre-K through 6th grade students. I don't see the need to change for our middle schools and high schools right now. For our pre-K 6, we have, in my mind, two options for us that are viable options. We continue with our hybrid at the start of January, right after winter break, in my mind, for a short period of time, a 1 week to 2 week time period. I think a 1 week time period is reasonable for us to get started, but we can certainly discuss that. With then the plan to return to in-person learning on a daily basis for pre-K through 6 students, like we did up until Thanksgiving in essence, would be the plan. The second option is we could have our pre-K through 6 students start in person right back away in January 4th and hope numbers stay where they're at. Just a lot of unknowns between now and the holidays on that piece of it. So as I've talked to principals and listened to community members and talked to you guys, here's what I'm recommending, but I'm open to conversation on this as well. I think kind of more of a two-tiered approach, combining those two options is in my mind, a proactive plan for us to look at is we begin the first week back in January in a hybrid model. When I say a week, that gets kind of messy because if we're going to be hybrid, we need it to be even number of days, either 4 or 6 days. 5 days isn't equitable for the A group and B group. But then the commitment then would be to come back right after that to in-person learning for pre-K 6. Obviously, we can monitor numbers and adjust if accordingly as needed if things would change. So the first step would be a short 1 week hybrid, and the second step would be looking to have students return pre-K 6 after that and hopefully continue that. The last thing I'll mention before opening up for your guys' conversation as well is I want to commit to something before winter break that we don't have to make changes on in the middle of break. I do not want to have to surprise people on December 30th that we need to change the model. I think it'd be hard for communication. It'd be hard for families and for staff to do that. So I'm trying to look at a way to make sure that we get something out to everybody ahead of time so they can plan one way or the other and don't have to change that plan before we come back that next school day on the 4th. So I think this will give us a little bit of that flexibility and some cushion if things do change. So with that, I'll take questions or thoughts you guys have. And
Well, I've got a couple comments. One of the things about this, and it's really nobody's fault, but, the Thanksgiving break, I know that everybody was looking forward to it, but I know a lot of teachers were working their tails off to try and prepare for after Thanksgiving. And I just want to commend them on, sticking to it because they were kind of kept away from their families a lot more than what most people actually understand because they were preparing to come back. And then we made a switch again. So they had to switch, and that it's not like a light switch that you can just turn it off. And you have to gear up for a whole new plan. And these teachers were working, like I said, their tail off to do this. And hopefully we will get to that point where we can all be back in the classroom and stuff like that. But I just want to commend those teachers for, what they did over Thanksgiving, because I know that's exactly what they were doing. And, preparing for our students, which is, what we want them to do. And, as we look forward to the new year, I know the board meeting that we had before Thanksgiving break, several board members, made a statement about, we hope that everybody wakes up and that it's crucial to wear your mask and to be 6 feet apart up through that. And Shannon, you just said our numbers came down, so a large part of the district felt that way. But as we get to Christmas break and a longer break, I just hope that our Linn-Mar patrons and stuff like that are really diligent with the face masks and, the 6 feet social distancing, because I think that's going to make a big difference on how we have to make that decision starting a new semester. And I just hope that those of you that are listening thank those teachers for what they did, but it's just going to take all of us, absolutely all of us, to be diligent through this Christmas break, and we won't meet again for quite some time. So I just wanted to make that statement, because I know everybody here supports that everybody in our district, and whoever you meet on the outside, please be diligent so that we can come back to where we know where the best learning is. So thank you for my soapbox there.
Britt?
Well, I'll just jump in and say, from the start, I've always said that I defer to the data because opinions vary and opinions aren't always based in science, and I do recognize the struggle. Right now, I would agree with Clark, and I would thank our community because 10%, even 10.7, is a whole lot better than the conversation we were having 4 weeks ago.
20-something.
So please keep that up over break. But I am comfortable going with Shannon's recommendation of going back to in-person the week after we return. I like the soft start simply because we don't know, and I agree with Shannon. I don't, as willing as I would be to have like a between Christmas and New Year's board session or whatever, families aren't going to be checking their email as much. It's going to be harder if there's a sudden surge to change things. So I would support the recommendation of the 1 week hybrid and then the returning for PK 6 to full in person.
The one thing we need to decide is if we want to do the 4th through the 8th, the 4 days, or whether we want to go, what was it?
Yeah, because the week would have to be either a 4-day
Yeah.
hybrid or a 6-day hybrid, and
In order to be the A and B shifting
yeah,
off.
'cause somebody-
otherwise.
So
someone's
we
gonna
would
be-
go Monday through Thursday, or we would do Monday
Through the following month.
through the following Monday. So that, to me, that's the only decision.
From a teacher perspective, is that Friday, like, is going back to full in person on a Friday really that, is it that much more impactful than waiting until the following Tuesday? I know
I
it can,
think we
I
get
know
mixed
it'll help
thoughts on that one, I
families.
think.
I
And some would
know.
say it'd be nice
I
to have
know.
everybody back for that last day of the week, so then you're wrapping into the next week with everybody back already, but others might say opposite, so.
And personally, I would like, if it was me, I'd like to kick Monday off and have the whole week be the same. So I guess I would prefer the 4-day if our numbers stayed where they are.
Is it really bad to go 5 days? I mean,
Doesn't
I
need
I
to
get
stay.
I get
Yeah.
that,
I
but,
think the 5 would be challenging, just
Okay.
because that group that's in A in that scenario would have 3 days, so then
Okay.
the curriculum timing would be off for the other group as well. So teachers either playing catch-up on Monday or slow playing
Oh, I
that Friday
see.
piece of it too.
And probably the biggest positive is we're making that decision this evening. We're making that now, so
Correct.
the
Everybody
families
knows.
can schedule everything.
Yeah.
Work days, back-to-school days, whatever it is, they're gonna know from today until the 4th or the 10th, whatever full day that is. I think that's,
Perfect.
you've done all your homework. The trends are working for us. Like you said, Clark, we need to hope they keep working for us. But I think that would be huge, just hearing the letters that we heard tonight and the emails we're receiving, and, a few weeks ago when we met, and everybody in the room said we want the kids back in school. And I think that's pretty unanimous across the community and across the school district. So I think that's huge. We're still not settling exactly the 4 or 5 days, whatever you want, but I think if you want support from us, we should put that in a motion and keep moving. I know maybe people have other opinions, but I don't want to stop
Yeah.
the discussion.
No, I would be in favor of 4 days.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think the 4-day would work well, because in that second week we'd come back would be a full week with everybody back, so we're not
And that's-
messing up that second week at all
I
for
agree.
families and teachers, and
I
I think that could work.
Anyone else with?
I'd say
Jim?
one thing, while I don't want go back to virtual. One of the positives that I heard was that PK through 6 teachers could actually see their kids' faces, could see their smiles.
Yep.
They could see when they got something, their face lit up, opposed to, with the mask, you can't tell. So that's one positive. I'll give that. And I am in favor of it too, like everyone else. Our goal is to get 5 or below. Then we get everybody back in, and that's our goal. So it is coming down, like it's been said. That's good. I check it probably like you guys every day. I want to see it down to 5 or less, and that's kind of where we want it.
So we need a
I'll make-
motion.
I'll make
Sure.
that motion.
Gary?
To approve the 4-day. Now, help me out here to clarify. We're not coming back to school till the 5th?
We come back.
January 4th is
The 4th is the first day for
Correct.
4 days,
Yes.
and then come back on the following Monday full.
actually be the Friday the 8th. So the motion would be to return to full in-person for pre-K 6 starting January 8th.
Okay, perfect.
That
That's,
was originally supposed to be the end of the second quarter.
yeah,
Hey, how about that?
amazing, huh?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, got that taken care of. So, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So it passes. We just need to get communication out to everyone so that everyone can plan accordingly.
Yeah, what we'll do on that,
Which
so I
would
was
be
thinking about it a lot, is Caitlin and I were talking about that a little bit ago before the meeting. Depending how this went, we'll be really specific in tomorrow's communication that goes out. Everything from A day, B day, and everybody
whole
back
thing?
on that piece of it too. So it'll be a little more detailed than some of our usual ones on that piece. I think that's important, just because that'll help everybody plan accordingly. So yep, we'll plan to get that out tomorrow to everybody.
All right, that sounds good.
When is the last day of second quarter?
Friday, January 29th.
So when are we gonna start talking about third quarter?
January 11th and the 25th.
So,
We don't
At a
have a
board
lot
level.
of,
Right,
time
no.
down on
Nope.
any
so just
Yeah.
to re-emphasize Clark's point, we will be having discussions about third quarter and the high school around January 11th. So keep your distance, wear your mask, because if we can get it down to 5%, there's a
Watch
chance.
the staff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, so we're on to 502. We have a motion.
I have a motion to approve the second reading of the policy recommendations as presented.
Okay, Kara, thank you. Any questions, discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes. Next, we have new business. And from this moment, we would maybe hear from JT first.
So excited.
Yes, I know.
Speaking
I
of-
bet you are. I
Yeah,
bet
speaking
you
of
are.
eyes lighting up, I know everyone's eyes lit up
Yes, this is
when they
so
saw
nice,
their
JT.
book, so.
You're not going to go through this case by case.
Line by line, Clark, yeah.
Do you have pages for us to turn back, do you?
Well, if you're looking to, for a special gift for that special someone for Christmas, wrap this baby up and.
There you go.
Yeah. No, real quick, this is the final step really in the audit process. For those of on the Finance Audit Committee, you were part of the exit interview with them. Not a lot has changed from that conversation. But just to kind of recap what's in this report, it's basically 3 audits in one. So the auditors look at obviously our financial statements and financial information. They also look at our internal controls, and then we're required to do an audit on federal money as well. So there's 3 different items in this particular report. On those 3 different audits, we received an unmodified opinion, which is the highest or the best opinion you can get, meaning that there's no significant deficiencies or anything of that nature that would require further investigation or anything like that. So that's good news. As far as the findings go, these are listed in the report. It's towards the end. There was a finding within the disbursement process, segregation of duties, and access to the vendor master file. Basically, that's an internal control type deficiency. We've been trying to work with our software vendor on how to mitigate that, but we're still kind of trying to work through that. There's not an easy fix to that. Our accounts payable person needs to access the accounts payable module, but there's no way to kind of, I guess, limit her from accessing the vendor file. So we're still trying to work through that process. there was a finding based on the expenditures in the other expenditures function in the certified budget were exceeded. Basically, some of our loan payments came out June 28th instead of July 1st. So because of that, we had to record them in this fiscal year. So actually, I wasn't very happy about that because there was no notification about that. So, but really nothing I can do about that now. But I guess moving forward, now that I know that's going to happen. And then in regards to certified enrollment, there were some variances in the count. Again, that's done through the state, through student IDs and whatnot, so that the auditors do have to note any differences in that count, and those are very minor. And for a district our size, to have basically minor variances is kind of a big deal. So kudos to Nathan and Terry and all the secretaries who input that information in the Power School. They do a great job with that. The auditors also provided some recommendations to the district. These are not included in the report. 4 of them, actually. They tell us to continue to monitor our employee compliance with the credit card policy. They found some things where either amounts were exceeded, tip amounts were exceeded, but again, nothing that rose to the level where it needed to be documented in the audit report. But just again, to tell us to continue to monitor that. They said that we could provide more oversight from coaches and sponsors on their individual sport or activity accounts by providing them more timely reports, just so again that they have more information at their disposal. Auditors recommend that we could enhance our internal controls within the payroll and HR functions, just some segregation of duty type things. Again, there's good controls right now, but they do feel like there's maybe some enhancements we could have within that. So we'll review those. And then the last recommendation is just to continue to monitor the negative lunch balances. At the time of the audit, the negative lunch balance was just under 30,000. So we did make an entry into our books basically to deem those uncollectible. But again, we just need to continue to monitor that account balance and do what we can to collect. And if we can't, then we need to make an entry and deem those uncollectible. So those were recommendations, again, that you'll find in the report, but just that they made for management and the board. With that, I'll take any questions folks might have, but.
I don't have a question, but we talked about this a couple of years ago. This is with the COVID thing is probably going to be even more difficult. With that negative balance of 30,000, is there any way that we can put forth, people are looking for ways to contribute to help others and stuff like that. Is there anything that we can do as a district to maybe reduce that amount by going to the pages of the district and saying, listen, I know you're not even close to being aware, but our lunch deficit is 30,000 if you'd like to help the district out, maybe. I don't know, maybe that's too far-fetched, but, the last time I think we talked, it was 9,000 when you mentioned that, and now it's up to 30,000. And I don't know if there's any way we can do it, but
Yeah,
I mean, it's a suggestion, at least it's out there. If somebody gives something, they give something. If they don't, they don't. We're still on the hook for the 30,000 so far.
Yeah, we have a donation account within the nutrition fund that we set up 2 years ago. Really, the only time that gets publicized, I would say, is for graduating seniors, when we notify families, hey, if you have a remaining balance and you want to donate it back to the school district, they have that option, or they can get a refund. But a lot of families do choose to donate that money to the negative fund balance.
I don't know if it just needs to be stated again so more people are aware of it.
You can also make
I don't know what you think.
You can also make directed donations to the foundation if you get like matching funds at work and this is something that you're passionate about. You can make a donation to the foundation because it's tax exempt charitable organization, because the school district is not. And so it doesn't always kind of fit that bill of a donation, but a way to do that to benefit your taxes is to make a donation to the foundation, earmarked for nutrition services, and then they can get that donation to the right people.
Okay, I just want to clarify. So you go through the foundation, but it could directly go to
Yeah,
what
you
I was
can
saying.
make,
Okay.
yep, you
Okay.
can make directed
But I
donations
think,
through
you
the
know, if we
foundation.
do send something out, I think that is, if that's the only way it can be done, I think they need to be aware of that too.
Yeah. Well, you can donate directly to the school district, and it would qualify as a taxable charitable deduction. But going through the foundation, there's an additional state credit that you get. So that's the benefit of going through the foundation if you're.
So there's a double benefit going
Correct.
through the foundation.
Yep, that's why you would go through the foundation.
Thank you.
I had to help somebody with that
Yeah.
one time, and their employer matching wouldn't let them donate directly to the school district. They had to do through the foundation.
Well, I didn't know that. Thank you
I
so
would
much.
be interested to know, and I'm not on the policy committee anymore, so maybe just to, or not the policy, the finance committee anymore, so maybe just to inform those people what the breakdown of that 30,000 is, how much of it is student lunch debt versus staff lunch debt, and maybe we can apply different treatment.
And we do apply different treatment already.
Yeah.
Staff are not required, they are restricted from having a negative fund balance or lunch balance.
Oh, okay.
If they do, we do have to go after them, because it's basically against code for them to have it, so they're not
Well,
allowed to charge.
Be getting as many updates, because George was always the one that asked
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
the
About
negative
that
lunch balance
particular
account,
thing,
but
yeah,
Yep.
okay.
thanks,
And-
JT.
And right now, it's kind of it's a non-issue because all lunches right now are free. So we don't have, we're not collecting money or anything like that. But obviously, once COVID passes, we'll kind of be back to that point where we need to monitor that a lot closer. So,
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So we need a motion?
I make a motion to approve the comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year 2020 as presented.
Okay, Karen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Make a motion to approve the letting of bus bids for a total cost not to exceed $550,000.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Any questions or something you'd like to tell us, JT? at
yeah,
all?
just real quick, preliminary, what we're looking at is another kind of our standard 4-bus replacement. So 3 of our regular buses and maybe 1 lift bus, all propane. Right now, about a third of our fleet is propane. So we would do these buses with propane. But if you remember last year, we saw a significant increase in the bus costs due to the seatbelt regulations. So we're confident that we'll be able to purchase 4 buses within this $550,000. But again, we expect the cost to be for each bus to be kind of around about $110,000 to $115,000 per bus. So it's a chunk of change compared to where it was between 90 and 95 even 2 years ago.
But it does include the seatbelt.
Yes, we're required to. Any new
It
bus
has to,
purchases.
yeah.
have to,
Anything
yep.
new has
Yep.
those?
Yep.
All righty. All right, so we need, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, carries.
I make a motion to approve the 2021-2022 physical standards exemption per cost of requirements to teach high school physical education in a 90-minute block quarter format instead of the traditional semester format.
Okay. Is there a
Second.
Okay, Barry?
This is just our standard annual application we have to apply for. I wish there was one we could just apply for once and be done, but no, we do it every single year, so it doesn't change anything to our current structure.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. 604.
Make a motion to approve the Linn-Mar High School Lion Food Pantry fundraiser as presented.
Second.
All right. Any discussion, questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Fine.
Make a motion to approve the open enrollment request as presented.
Carol?
Second.
Okay, Barry?
They're all eating candy over there, so
We'll
take
keep
care
it
of it
going.
over here.
Okay.
Clark, you need to keep the candy bowls moving.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So we're on to consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, so we got Kira and Britt. Any discussion?
On a consent agenda?
Yes.
Yes, I would like to thank those 2 people that are retiring, Cheryl and
Nicole?
Noel.
Noel.
Noel, okay.
But our hearts go out to the family of Christopher Rundell being deceased. So our prayers will be with his family.
Yep, I was going to echo that one as well. That's not very often that we have that as our personnel report, so
Yeah.
just sincere thoughts and prayers go to the family as well, so.
Absolutely. I had a question on the, let's see here. The HVC projects, Shive Hattery, was that due to the derecho that we had to do that? Or is that part of other stuff we were?
It's not directly related to derecho. It kind of accelerated because of derecho.
okay.
Since we're doing the roof work up there,
Okay.
it made sense to go ahead and replace that rooftop unit that's above the gym,
Okay.
since it's in need of a replacement. So that's what this
Okay.
particular
I
item.
I was kind of thinking that
Yep.
one, I wasn't too sure. Is there anything else? Anybody have questions? Okay, so all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, so we're at the board communications calendar. Just want to make note that December 17th, 11:30, board visit at Boulder Peak, which is a change from this week because we will be back in school, so.
If you have not RSVP'd for that one to Gala, please let her know so we can let Dan and his staff know to plan the number of people we'll see.
Okay. And I see on here, the CTE meeting is virtual. Last time it was both, so it looks like it's, and before it was on site, so.
I thought the email we received said he hadn't made a decision yet.
Oh,
He must have.
no, I'm looking at
Yeah.
this and I was like, maybe he had.
And that's still a work in progress. We've been evolving.
Okay, so,
He's leaning towards virtual.
okay, well, you can just let us know.
Because we were
That's
about
fine.
half and half last time.
I know, that's why I was just wondering which way we're going. All right, anything else? Oh, January 7th, is anyone interested in doing Marion City Council, doing the notes on that?
I can do it.
Barry?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll get that down.
I'll just highlight as well, the January 14th board visit to Westfield. That's pretty quickly after we come back, after break as well, so just make sure that one's on your calendar too. So
Okay.
we had a shorter version of board visit opportunities this year, so we're kind of squeezing a couple of them in here in a tight window. But I think it's good to get in the building as much as we can.
All right. We look at the next page, January 19th, is superintendent Lion Learning. It looks like is that still kind of the tentative schedule?
It is. Yep, we're still planning to have line learning on January 19th at noon and 5:30. I've debated to delay it a little bit based on some topics, but we'll see how things are going COVID-wise. It will be virtual for sure. We had great turnout last time doing that route, so we'll do that again. And as of now, we'll leave that date.
Okay, sounds good. And policy, anything else here? Board visit, and then it says Bowman Woods, January 28th is a board visit, so it's the end of our things here. Looking there at the committee assignments, make sure that what you thought you were signed up for is what is listed there. If there's any changes or something that we need, just let us know. Otherwise, we'll figure it's all good. So if entertain the adjournment.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 6:42 PM.
Okay. Second? Okay, Britt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful holiday.
Happy holidays.
Everybody?
Yeah.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Close out 2020, right?